Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are watching in from. Welcome to another Product People live stream. We're very excited to have you here today. I'll give you a few moments if you'd like to either scan the QR code we have here or visit slido.com. This is where you can ask questions throughout the presentation today. We do have a Q&A at the end as well, and also an icebreaker poll to start with. So please go to slido.com. You can also enter the code there, 3202966, or just scan the QR code from your mobile as well, and then you can join us directly there. Today's presentation, we're very excited to have with us today a speaker on product localization. We have Xenia from N26. She's the strategy and operations lead over there, and we're taking us through the ups and downs of product localization, which is actually a very interesting topic for myself personally as well. A little bit about product people and myself. I've been a senior product management consultant with the team now for over 2 years. My background is in business and hospitality, but since becoming a product manager over 6 years ago, I've been working in a lot of different spaces, including banking, health tech, renewables, and sustainability, as well as gastronomy and identity verification. So a lot of different industries, a lot of different topics, and actually quite a few of them, we were talking about product localization. So today's topic definitely hits very close to home for me. About product people, we actually have 2 different work streams that we engage very actively in. First of all, we do the interim product management. We do also product leadership and product operations, very similar to the background that I just shared with you. We have now over 40 in-house employees that do support different companies of all different sizes with interim product management. On the other side, we also have free events and talks such as this one. We also host a lot of in-person events in multiple cities around Europe and Africa as well. So definitely very happy to have you here as part of our growing community. Before we begin, like I said, we have a quick icebreaker poll to just get a feeling of where everyone is at in terms of our audience. The question is, have you worked in fintech, finance, or banks? You can answer yes or no, and that just gives us kind of a general sense of the context that you're all coming with, so that Xenia also has some understanding of the audience as she continues her presentation. Personally, like I mentioned, I worked in banking as well, and so I think I'm very excited to see not only how today's topic applies to my experiences, but also to the experiences I have from multiple other industries, right, and products as well, because I think there's a lot to be applied from the topic today. So I'll give you a few moments to answer, and then I'll share with you all the poll results in a moment. All right, taking a look at the poll. It actually looks to be quite a 50-50 split. So 50% approximately have worked before in fintech, finance, and banking, and then 50% have not. So definitely a nice mix of the audience coming in. All right, so without further ado, I'd love to hand over to you, Xenia, to take us through the ups and downs of product localization. I will stop sharing my screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Just quickly sharing my screen here. All right. So yes, like Stacy said, I've been working with N26, the online bank, which some of you might know, or most of you know. It's an online bank which operates mostly in Europe and which offers multiple products such as trading and savings and current account and cards. And today, I'd like to talk to you about ups and downs of product localization, a topic quite close to me because, as I will be mentioning, I'm working on the French market for N26, and banking product on the French market has its own challenges. So basically, just to say a few words about what N26 is, we have more than 8 million customers in more than 24 countries. In France, we have reached 3 million customers, and this figure was reached, if I'm not mistaken, in 2023. And our competition is quite varied, and for sure you have heard those names, such as, of course, Revolut, Bank, Monzo Bank, Orange Bank, Hello Bank, and in France specifically, we have a few local competitors, which are Boursorama, Fortuneo, and Lydia. Yeah. And after talking a bit about N26, I'd like to say what actually is strategy and operations lead, because basically not all companies have strategy and operations. And this is a product people meetup, so most of the people are PMs or aspiring PMs. So basically how it's structured at N26 is that we have global functions such as product, IT, marketing, data, and so on. So global responsibility, and we have local markets, which you can see on the slide. Here you can see France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. So the four most important markets for N26, but not the only ones. And basically, the strategy and operations team sits within the market. So it is responsible for the products and the projects for the French market. And now, after talking a bit about N26 and also what is strategy and operations, I'd like to introduce the topic of the product localization. So I assume that most of you from the name know about what this is about, what I'm talking about. But basically, what we're looking at here is that we have some products which are global, and we have some products which are local, and we have some global products which are localized. So localization means that we adapt the product that we have for needs of the local market. So what does it mean exactly is that, and also why it's being done. First reason is that the local regulation often requires products to do some changes, and this is quite rigid in terms of what the regulator wants, and it's not quite changeable sometimes. So the player, if he wants to participate in the local market, needs to adapt to this, otherwise he will be breaking the local regulation policy. Then second thing is that avoid customer discrimination. I will be talking about it a bit later. So what that means is that sometimes when a product is not localized, the customers face discrimination, and it's very difficult to operate in the market. So they cannot quite operate in an agile manner. And third thing is to obviously in each market we have a few competitors, and to operate in this market and to beat the competition, we have to localize the features. And also the thing which is not written on the slide, but which most of you know, I think, is that finance and banking overall is very regulated industry and very locals based as well. So the regulation in Italy might not be the same as the regulation in France. And not all the businesses are like this. For example, in Amazon or some business where you can sell the same product on different markets. For example, you produce, I don't know, a good, and you sell it on different markets. Of course, you have demand and supply, you have local competition, but the product could be the same. It could be the same can of Coke, could be the same socks, it could be the same thing. But unfortunately for the banks, of course, the basic functionality is the same, but the product itself, not quite. So let's talk a bit about what it means. So in this presentation, I have a few examples, not all of them N26 based, and not all of them actually banking based, because banking is not the only industry where localization is very relevant. But basically, the biggest and the first example for me, because I've also worked on this project, is IBAN localization. So here on the slide, you can see that in Q4 2023, Revolut, which is our main competitor, have launched Dutch IBANs, so IBANs in the Netherlands. Many customers don't even understand what that is, basically, because it's not some hip new feature, some new thing that could be glamorous and marketed to the customers. However, what Revolut has done, and this is not the first local IBAN, I believe it's the sixth local IBAN, what they have done is that they have launched the account number, which begins with specific letters and which is adapted to that market. So, and they actually mentioned IBAN discrimination. I will later explain what that is. So, a bit about the IBAN itself. So, IBAN is the number of bank account which you have in your banking application or in your banking website. So basically, it's the account number. I'm sure everyone have already encountered this when you have to give this account number to your landlord, to your phone line, to your operator, to your friend even who wants to pay you back, or just to a colleague you want to do a present to. I mean, there's a lot of any kind of service provider. Sometimes if he wants like to give you a check and you have to pay him. So basically, this is an account number, which in France is called the RIB, but in other markets it's called an IBAN, and it has a specific structure, which is not that important in the context of this. But basically what Revolut has done is that they adapted it for a specific country. So customers in this country will have IBAN beginning with the country code of this country. And why this is important is that, as you can see on that slide, on the banking market, and not only French one, there is such a thing as IBAN discrimination. So what it means is that if, for example, your landlord wants an IBAN beginning with FR, so the French IBAN, and if you have a German IBAN, sometimes your landlord will say, listen, I really don't accept this, I really want French IBAN. Or sometimes you cannot do regular payments, for example, or you cannot pay by your card or by your account number. It's just not accepted by a French, for example, phone provider. It's complicated. It's not really, how to say, if you want to use a banking infrastructure in a specific country, you will have a problem because your IBAN is just not compatible with the local IBANs. And every time you have to do a payment, you will have to think about this. And most people don't really like thinking about their banking IBANs. So this is why Revolut has done this. And as shown here, N26 has also done this. So in Q2 2023, we have offered our customers the French IBAN. So here on the right, you can see a very nice marketing campaign, which has been also worked by a few of my colleagues. So basically, you can see that we provided our clients the opportunity to use the French IBAN if they wish to. Also, okay, so this was my first example of product localization. And also, just to go a bit more, is that from the outside, it seems that it's quite easy, that you just change 2 letters and that's fine. But basically, I can tell you that from the internal company perspective, it's not easy at all. It requires many different units cooperating. It's a very significant change, actually, because the IBAN is everything. It's your transactions, it's your card, it's your history, it's your transaction history, it's your providers. If you change your IBAN, you have to update everyone. If it's your phone bill, you have to let them know. If it's your landlord, you have to let them know. So from the customer and from the company, it's not an easy thing to do at all. Then my second example was about payments localization, where I take also N26, but a completely different project on a completely different market. This is Spanish market. And here we have a case of Bizum. To give a bit of context, Bizum is a local payment method. So, and this local payment method, it's not only very common, it's used by 23 million of customers. So if you think about the Spanish market and about the size of Spain, it means that if you don't have it, you cannot transact with other Spanish banks. Of course you can, but Bizum is so common that without it, the bank is excluded from, not excluded, but permitted to grow a bit less than they would have with it. So basically why Bizum is good and why Bizum is easy, because you only have your phone number and your email address. And if you just give the phone number, the user who has Bizum as well can send you money and that's it. So they don't need your IBAN, they don't need your address, they don't need your full name and so on. They can send you their money with your phone number and that's it. So we introduced it, I believe, in the Q2 or Q3 of 2024, and it was a massive project for the Spanish market. While in other markets, it's something which is not known at all. Then third example, which I'd like to talk about, was about payments localization. So the payments localization for BlaBlaCar. This is actually a funny story because this one, I've actually heard someone from BlaBlaCar in one meetup who was talking about the fact that if you want to launch in the new markets, sometimes you cannot go there if you don't have local payment options. So basically, some payment options don't exist anywhere else, but in this market in particular, if you don't have them, you're dead. You cannot do business. Basically, most of the people use them, and if they cannot pay you like this, they will not be using your product. It's just too complicated. So we're talking here about the Brazilian market and about a few local payments methods. So basically, BlaBlaCar, as you know, is a service where if you want to go from point A to point B using different transport methods, you can do that in an easy and convenient way. So basically here you can see three payment methods which I used. So Pix, Elo, and Hypercard. And to give a bit of context again, Pix is something similar to Bizum, but I would say that Pix is different in a sense that Bizum is a private company and Pix is a government sponsored payment method where, again, you can give someone the Pix identifier or the Pix QR code, and then the payment is processed within a few seconds. So it's quite easy and convenient to do. And in the credit and debit card, you can see the standard Visa and MasterCard and Maestro as well, but you can see the two cards, which are again very commonly used in the Brazilian market. And Hypercard, for example, is a credit card where they don't support debit transactions, but the client can pay by this card and then pay later. And again, it's quite easy and convenient and very widely used among Brazilian customers. So basically, I took that example directly from the BlaBlaCar website to kind of show that sometimes this is a local project where it might not be a cool new feature, or it might not be a new transportation option, or it might not be a flashy campaign. But if you don't have the local payment methods for your customers, you only have, for example, Visa and MasterCard, they will not be happy and they will not be using your product as much as you would like them to. And then my final example is to do with document acceptance. Again, this is a very, those who did work in banks and finance know that document verification, QIC, and so on is a very touchy subject and a very important subject for most of the online banks and banks in general. Because if you open a banking account, well, I think I will begin by another side of it. If you want to register yourself on a website to buy furniture, for example, they will ask you your name, your surname, your email, and maybe your details of the card if you make a purchase, or any forum or any website. They will not commonly ask you for your documents. However, if you want to register yourself in a bank, on a crypto platform, on an exchange platform, on a trading one, anything related to finance, any bank, they will ask you for your information. So your passport, your address, and so on. So basically, they require a lot of information. They not only want your name and surname, they want your date of birth, they want whether your documents issued, they want the authority who gave you the document, they want the date of expiry, they want the document type. So many people ask why do banks require such massive information from the customer when they didn't even do a single transaction with them. Basically, it's related to the prevention of fraud and the prevention of malicious activity on the platform. And on the website, you can see two things. So on BlaBlaCar, you can see the types of documents which are accepted in Brazil. And on the right, you can see WISE, the types of documents which are accepted, I think, in France. So like if you look at the BlaBlaCar, I will just briefly describe the RG is the Brazilian ID, so the national card, and the CPF is also Brazilian ID, but for foreigners and for some specific cases, this is something equivalent to the social security number, where those documents are required for customer identification. And on the right, you can see WISE, and it's pretty standard document options: passport, driver's license, national ID. But you can see something unusual here. You see refugee identity document, which is from experience. I can tell you that this is not a document which is accepted by many banks and by many institutions, but as you can see, WISE accepts it and verifies the customers afterwards. And maybe the last thing that I will say why this is important, because normally there is a specific team which determines which documents are accepted, which verifies the documents or works with some provider to verify the documents, and then comes back to the client with the decision. Either he's accepted, he's verified, or something is incorrect or suspicious with the documents, and he has to verify again, or he's not verified. So this is also localization, because as you can imagine, that screen in a different country will be different. So every country has their own document types, their own specification, and this needs to be localized. And basically, the last two slides have to do with localization in general and what it means for the company itself. So this slide, I made it specifically, why is localization difficult? Basically, there are a few things. So first of all is market perspective. Normally on every market, you have already players who do this. So for example, French banks already do French IBANs. It's been here since 50 years. It's established, and it's quite difficult because they already have it, and the company has to develop something often from scratch. Second is company perspective. So basically, this is one of the most painful ones, actually, because often company has to consider global projects and local projects, and global resources and local resources. Imagine if you're a company who's working on 10 markets, like obviously, if you want to develop 10 different features, then you don't obviously have 10 different product teams and 10 different PMs to work on each market. Sometimes, like BlaBlaCar, the product is in Brazil and the PM might be in France. So sometimes it's just in terms of prioritization, it's not easy. Also, what has to be taken into account is that companies often have other priorities, such as they have to work on the regulatory projects, they have to work on new product launches, they have to work on investing in, I don't know, fighting financial crime. They have to work on other things other than local features. So it's always a gamble, not a gamble, sorry, it's always a bargain between local market and the global priority. Your user perspective, this is not often considered, but it's very important. Sometimes the user itself, they don't really want, if they use a local product and they like it, why would they switch to a new product? If they, of course, if there's a need and a pain, they will do it. But sometimes switching, even IBAN switching, is kind of painful. If you have a lot of providers and a lot of people who you have to update, it's kind of painful. So people often, they don't really care to switch to use some local feature if they already had global one. And the last one is law and compliance perspective. So here again, if the regulation is strict, and if the regulation is kind of tough to adapt the product to, sometimes, of course, everyone wants a great user interface. Everyone wants great things that can satisfy the users. But sometimes if you see the regulatory requirement and you can see the product, you have to make a compromise because basically the requirement needs to be done and the product needs to be adapted to the requirements, or basically this is a space which is not that easy, because obviously every PM wants to optimize the resources and do the user flow as good as they possibly can. However, the compliance side often comes later, and some modifications and negotiations occur. And I think the very last slide, so not to run over the time that we have with it. Basically, what are the key questions that we're asking personally, like in 26, when implementing some local features? So here I will be giving examples from the French market, because obviously I'm from the French market. So the product setup, the first one is, shall we do it through some provider or shall we do it in-house? What it means in-house, will it be developed within 26, or will we use some other provider to do it? Why? Because often if you just, for example, again, an example of BlaBlaCar, if you just have a payment provider and you have your platform, then maybe you can just switch your like you can make a link between the provider and the platform, and you can code it and you can kind of switch it on, switch it off, and so on. It's a bit more complicated than that, but in that case, you don't need to do much. But if you need to develop localization from scratch, there's quite a few things to do, mildly speaking. So basically, you need to do it in-house. So you need internal product teams and internal development. This could be much longer and much harder. And then will all the users have access to this feature? Again, some people need it, some people don't. You have to consider who will have access to this and why, and yeah. Also, actually, what is not mentioned here is that there's, of course, always a bug in between. Do you really want this, or you can survive without it? You can give the user another competitive advantage. You don't need any local features. They can just use something else. And the competitive advantage is just more important to the user than the localization. The project management, again, I've briefly mentioned this, who's providing the local market perspective. So here, the question is, again, for example, does the PM on the project know the local market? Like, does he know the regulation? Does he know what the users do? Does he know what the users use? Does he know the user behavior? Does he know the user feedback? Because it can drastically change from market to market. Basically, it's hard to explain when you haven't seen that in practice, but different markets have different user behaviors and different markets have different user needs. And sometimes the PM is just not familiar with the things that are happening on the local market, and it's quite difficult to kind of flesh out the solution. This is also very pronounced in the document acceptance space, because basically document acceptance, you need to know what the document looks like, you need to know what the information is in the document. Sometimes you need to know the local language. So normally, most companies have local teams who have their inputs for the product. I've already spoken about priorities. I'd like to mention a bit about results, because of course, it's an important question. How will you measure the results of the localization? So if you earned 2 million before it and you earned 5 million afterwards, does it mean that localization was successful, or does it mean that you just increased your user base because of different reasons, and localization hasn't really played a role in all of this? So when something like this is done, this question is always important. Like, why is it needed, and what results are we expecting? Like, if everyone uses French IBAN in a year, is that the result, or should we generate more revenue, or like, what's the suggested outcome? And I see that almost no time is left. So last thing is about law and compliance. Again, not many product managers, I would say, are really keen to first think about law and compliance. But it's very important to consider the compliance to the law, the reporting needs, the regulator, informing the regulator, the local rules, and the way it works with the local legal space. So I think that was the last one. Yeah. And yeah, thanks a lot for your attention. Sorry if there was a lot of information like in a flow, but basically maybe one closing thought is that from my point of view, the localization can often be very valuable and the customers really appreciate it because a loyal and grateful customer is very valuable to any company. But basically, it's always a bargain between something the company wants to do in its strategy globally and something the local market needs. So many factors need to be considered before a decision to localize something has to be taken. So I think that's it, and thanks a lot. Yep.
Thank you so much. I'm going to steal the screen from you in a moment, but to be honest, I would have let you go for even longer, Xenia, because I think what you covered was so important, especially in those very first few examples of what product localization is, right? Because I think even just understanding in the N26 world helps us understand all the different kinds of product localization, right? And I thought your last two slides were fantastic. I would use that actually even as a go-to reference for so many of these global companies, right, who have products in different countries. So definitely a good reference point. So I invite everyone now, if you haven't already scanned the QR code or logged into slido.com with the code here, toss us all of your questions. I'm going to buy you some time by walking you through a little more about product people and whatnot, but I know I have a lot of questions for you, Xenia, and I'm sure the audience does as well. So I'll give you a few moments to throw those into the list for us. As I was mentioning about product people, right, not only do we get to have really cool sharing sessions like this with Xenia and other speakers, we also do the interim product management. So these are just a few examples of the different kinds of interim product management that we do. I have many colleagues who are interim product managers. They often occupy an existing role, right, either for those who are maybe on parental leave, or maybe there's something very specific, a strategic initiative that needs resources right away, right? We can come in for anywhere between 3 to 12 months and start helping out very quickly. I know of other colleagues of mine who also do product coaching consulting. I myself have also come in to help upskill a product team. We also do workshops, things like this, depending on where a product team is and where they want to get to next. We also do cool product discovery, always a very exciting topic, especially if you want to run like an MVP. I have colleagues who've done low and no code pilots just to be able to test things before the company invests more resources there. So just a couple different examples. Also, here is not an exhaustive list, but definitely a great list of some of our clients that we've worked with over the years. This is a selection of our B2C clients, right? Especially if you're based in Europe, you definitely recognize a lot of these names. I know I use DeepL quite often in my work. And here is a slide with our B2B clients, including World Health Organization, Sastrify, and so on. We've had the great opportunity to work with some amazing clients. And then just a little bit about product people, because as product managers, we do love numbers. We've supported over 200 cross-functional teams. We have a crew of over 42 product leaders and managers. And of course, because we love a nice diversity statistic, we've got 62% women on the team and 66% in leadership. So very, very proud of the stats that we have and where we've gotten to in the last few years. Of course, a nice little photo of all of the beautiful faces that make up our very strong team here. And that brings us back to Q&A. Good. So I have a few questions already in the list. I'm going to sneak one of mine to the top of the list because I'm very curious. Xenia, you were talking a lot about kind of the different areas, right, that you have to think about, success metrics and so on. It sounds like there's a lot of cross-functional team work that you need to do for product localization. And I'm sure it really differs or varies based off of what kind of localization. Do you have any strategies from your experience that help facilitate all of that alignment, right, between teams when you're localizing something or trying to get that process going?
Yeah. I think I would begin by saying that it's true that it's well, if I take the French urban example, and anyone from Engine 6 who worked on the project will tell you that it's almost the whole company. So like there wasn't a department which wasn't really related to the project in some way and hasn't worked on it in some time. Basically, one thing is getting the requirements to all the different teams, preferably at the same time, because when the initial requirements are specified, so first when the decision to do a local project is made, and then the requirements are specified, this is often the time, especially in big companies, but in small as well, when some negotiations start happening in terms of different requirements and some departments. So there is a different understanding by different people of what the requirements are. And often, more often than not, I think it's where it's a bit dangerous in terms of, not dangerous, but there's a risk that those requirements are understood differently by for example, I don't know, customer support and banking operations and product and engineers and so on. And then from that misalignment rises a lot of questions and a lot of things afterwards that could have been avoided if the requirements have been shared and documented and streamlined across different departments. And also, I think the planning is often very paramount because if everyone knows the launch date, this is one thing, but each team needs to sometimes works on their own schedule, and sometimes different teams require more work than the others. And it's quite important that someone has the calendar um, and the coordination between different work streams, because some of them could take 3 months, some of them could take 2 weeks, and there needs to be a full picture and definitely a place where all the requirements and all the developments are specified as well. Not sure that I how to say that this is very might appear a bit as a bit evident, but I would say that sometimes simple things like clearing out the understanding of the specific thing between two different teams. Once again, if there's not certitude that both of them have understood it, it could help save a lot of money and a lot of time.
Absolutely agree with you. It sounds simple when you say it out loud in the presentation, right? But of course, in action and reality, right? Communication, alignment, documentation, clarification of requirements, these are actually quite complex things in reality, right? So I think a great answer from your side. Question from the audience. Do you use any specific tools that help you with product localization?
Actually, here I wouldn't say there is a specific, the toolbox overall. There is always a project management tool with different tickets and so on. It can be a different one in different companies. There is always the synchronizations, the regular synchronizations between different teams as well. There are always like products, all the things that you've mentioned, the MVP and the different work streams and discovery phase and implementation phase and so on. So basically the framework itself, I wouldn't say it's that specific. However, I think what's important is the synchronization also between the local team and the product team, which works on the project. Because often, for example, in the example of the refugee visa, if the local team has some knowledge, they're kind of keeping to themselves. And sometimes there is not enough communication between the local team and the product one. Something in the product can be missed. And then no matter what tool you use, you're kind of like past some important thing because the local team or the local expert was not asked at the right time.
Great answer. I think that actually connects with the next question as well, which is what indicators signal the need for localization in a particular market? You were mentioning about like the local teams and whatnot, but do you have an example of like, how would you know that, this is something we should float up or consider?
Yeah, this is actually a great question. It seems simple, but it's not that simple. Basically, in any company, I think, which works on multiple markets, there's a mechanism which gives the PMs and the leads and everyone, which steers the company and determines the strategy. There is a mechanism for, first of all, gathering client feedback, and also a mechanism for gathering user insights and also market insights. Sometimes it's very developed. I think in some customer and consumer-oriented companies, it's a whole department where you have constant customer surveys, focus groups, constant user profiling, user segments, and a lot of research that goes into this, because in every market you have your competitors, you have your benchmark, you have your indicators of performance of that market, you have different products that are going out because you are just looking left and right and your competitors are like doing something. So basically you have all that. And also there's a question of product market fit in general. So basically it's a strategic question of, does your product fit the local market? But actually, I would say it's a combination of a few things. If the customers are constantly asking for something and you are seeing it's a very important point, for example, about discrimination, I can tell you that it's a real reason why customers contact the customer support and they say that my provider doesn't accept this, my card is not accepted, or like my IBAN is not accepted, I don't understand, I don't like this, I was a loyal customer, and so on. So when this becomes overwhelming, and also it's the top one feature requested by customers, then it's not a difficult decision to kind of decide to implement this. But also sometimes in BlaBlaCar, for example, I think they even did it before going into the local market, because just their research, I assume, or their market experts told them that this is used by a third of the market. So it's the third most popular thing after Visa and MasterCard, or even more popular than Visa and MasterCard. So you just cannot go there if you want to operate in there. So basically, to combine all those components, I would say that it's a combination of the market research, of the user feedback, of sometimes the opinion of people also who lead the market, because of course market leadership has a vision on what features and what things do they want to bring to that market, and very like specific, very simplistic example, but if they don't want to localize it, they just want to offer some different feature, for example, for business accounts. They just want to go into the business space. They're not interested in local features. They want to go to business space because they believe that the strategy is business. Well, it's obviously not. I'm not talking about then any specific bank. I'm just giving an example. So basically, this lead is also bringing his vision into the market development, because obviously someone needs to make a decision at the end of the day. Will this be developed, or will this be dropped, or will this be developed but in 3 years?
Perfect. I think that's such a comprehensive answer for something that, like you said, simple question, complex answer. So the next question is always an interesting one, especially in the product industry. How is AI impacting the localization industry? What will be the impact on translators and maybe other aspects of localization as well?
Yeah, actually, again, interesting question, because it's just touches an aspect which I haven't talked about, which is actually content localization and marketing localization. This is something which, again, it's a bit on the side of the product localization, because product is product, and content, by content, I mean all the text, all the advertising campaigns, positioning, marketing, all the slides and materials and ads which will be shown on YouTube, on Instagram and Facebook, everywhere to the customer. So all of those needs to be translated into the French, Spanish, any specific language, and all of those needs to be localized sometimes as well, because what will work for the French customer might not work for the Chinese customer, and what works for the Chinese customer might not work for a Canadian customer. So all of this is again localization, and there's specific people who are translating all of this. But with AI, my personal opinion is that it will become much easier, and much easier to gather information and insight, first of all, and much easier to talk to the customers as well, and to kind of do the translation and the adaptation for a specific market. Because where you needed a specialist who will kind of take into account all the knowledge that we've gathered, all the vocabulary that we have, because each company has their own marketing vocabulary and like user vocabulary, the names of the products, the words that they use, the phrases that they use, that they don't use, all of that. I think the AI will be very instrumental because it will be literally easier to talk to different customers without having multiple localization teams which constantly work on localizing the assets and localizing the content.
Totally agree. I think we have time for one more question. Here, I think it touches on some of the success metrics, right, that you had presented as one of the questions asked. But the question is, how do you measure the impact of localization and understand its business impact? What's the ROI of localizing based on your experience? So maybe just more examples of kind of how you might think of defining it.
Yeah. Here I can give a few specific ones because for some features it's actually easier and for some it's harder. For Bizom, for example, or any local payment method, I can tell you, like the person who worked with analytics quite a lot, that you have specific indicators. The most common one, and I think known to all the product managers, is adoption rate. So basically, how many people out of your total user base, or like active user base, whatever you want to call it, how many people adopt this feature after 2 weeks, a month, and so on. This is like a percentage of it. So if 15% of your users use Bizom is one thing, if 65% of your users use Bizom is another thing, then you have, of course, the absolute values. So you have the number of people, if it's, I don't know, 5,000 people, or you have 5 million people, or you have 2.5 million people, then you can see if a specific feature is good or not. Then for payments specifically, here you can have the volume of transaction, of course. You always have the volume of transaction. So how much money goes through that means of payment. So how many people pay with Pix, how many people pay with something else, how many people use this document, how many people use this document. Actually, there's a counterexample when some people use a specific document, but later product manager or someone finds out that actually not many people use that document, not many people use that payment method, and not many people have refugee visas, so on. So basically, this type of document is then discontinued just because if you have 10 people, then of course you will not be paying to your engineer to maintain the feature used by 10 people. But coming back to the question, so this is quite straightforward. If we're talking about payment methods, you can see the volume, you can see the adoption rate, and you can see the number of people. But for example, IBANs, or for something more complex, because I think I haven't given all the examples possible, there are a lot more than I have talked about. For IBANs, it's not that simple, and I can tell you it's a challenge we have literally today, like this month, last month, and we'll have it for quite a while, because you can have different things such as user behavior, which influences your metrics. So basically, the users come, the users leave, the users stop using the application, and sometimes it's quite difficult to determine. But generally, the approach that is used, if some local feature is implemented, is comparing users with it and users without it. So are they more active? Are they more bringing more profit? Are they using the application more? Are they using more features? Are they taking premium account or like ultra account like in Revolut? So in general, you are comparing people with who use the localized feature and not, and of course also you're looking at the market at the market growth as well, because if your market was, I don't know, 2 million, and then you introduced a bunch of features and it's still 2 million, then maybe the localization was not the strategy that you should have taken, and maybe you should have simply invited more people and kind of coped with a lack of local adaptation. Yeah.
You have some great examples of these metrics based off of what you kind of shared with us earlier. So I think that's really helpful. And I think we can also all take those learnings, right, and apply them to whatever product, right, or feature that we are considering localization for. But I think you have some really great, I like how you've calculated that into it. So thank you so much, Xenia, for sharing. I think we'll wrap up here for this afternoon. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to product localization. So thanks so much, Xenia. Do
Thank
make sure
you.
follow her on LinkedIn as well. I think we'll see a lot of exciting things coming from N26 as well. Feel free also to keep in touch with product people, right? We are hiring some German speaking roles here. And also we have a newsletter, right, that kicked off for more product stories and insights about product management. And also stay tuned because in about 2 weeks' time on April 30th, we do have another sharing session about B2B product innovation with Daniel. So hope to see you all then and enjoy the rest of your day.